Take eloquence out and wring its neck. Paul Verlaine.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hull.
And I'm Lee Esses. Today's rule is not one that's brought to you by Elmore Leonard, who's brought most of the rules we've talked about this month. This one has actually been made popular by a very little-known author out there. His name is Stephen King. He writes horror novels.
Yeah, just a couple of them, you know. This advice is something you will probably hear a lot over the course of your writing, especially as you start to approach the editing phase. People will always tell you, kill your darlings, kill your darlings. And there's some merit to that, but also this is a rule you don't always have to follow.
This rule, I feel, comes in direct conflict with the most precious rule of all, and that is to write selfishly, and that one you aren't allowed to break. Killing your darlings means to take those moments in this story that you're really attached to, that don't necessarily serve the story as a whole, take those out. Just because you really like them is not always going to serve the reader as much as it does you, the writer.
Stephen King, when he talked about this, implied that a lot of the idea behind Kill Your Darlings is about the ego of the author. As much about getting rid of your own ego and letting go of your attachments to the book as it is about being willing to remove things that you really like.
The reason why you hear this all over the place comes down to a handful of things. The first of which is that editing, especially self-editing, and if you're new at this, it's all very difficult. This bit of advice gives you permission to make sure the story is priority over you, the author. It's very easy for authors to make their own lives very difficult by being emotionally attached to certain collections of letters. If you approach your writing with this mentality of serving the reader more than serving your egocentric little heart, then the story will thrive for it.
I would venture to say a lot of the books that you encounter that have things like prologues and lengthy descriptions and unnecessary scenes were because the author did not kill their darlings. A lot of authors will just keep things that serve no purpose to the story just because they really, really like it. They really, really like how they wrote the scene, or these really interesting world details, or this really pretty description. And in most cases, those are unnecessary.
I am also going to throw Lee under the bus a little bit here. I feel like having darlings in your story comes more frequently with pantsers than it does with plotters, because as you approach this scene, you go and you do a little bit of research for it, and then you're like super excited about all this information that you found, so you vomit all of this information onto the page because it's cool and exciting and you really wanted to share this thing you learned with anyone possible, forgetting that the character doesn't know this and the reader doesn't need to know it because it's underneath the water in that iceberg.
Or as a pantser, you are just kind of meandering along and you wrote a really interesting scene. Maybe you have a setting that you did really well, or this particular interaction that just kind of makes you giggle and kick your feet a little bit. You become really attached to those because you had fun in the process of writing it. But if it doesn't serve your story, these are the darlings that you need to kill. If you don't, then it becomes really easy to compromise the rest of your book just to keep something that's not plot relevant. You run into the word count problem of, I have too many words, I have too many scenes, I have too many things, I need to remove something, but I really, 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 really like the scene, it's super cute and I don't want to let it go, so I'm going to get rid of this other thing. But you don't make the necessary changes, and that causes problems for the overall flow of your book.
You also can accidentally introduce red herrings and Chekhov's guns by having this really cool bit of information that you're conveying to the readers. And at that point, the readers are going, okay, when is this going to become relevant? Especially if you are writing in a faster paced genre, something that's a little leaner on that word count, a little more efficient with how you tell a story. something like a murder mystery as compared to a sci-fi or fantasy. Those types of things, the audience will glom onto and keep. And especially if you write it with as much enthusiasm that I hope you write everything, they will assume it's relevant when it's not.
And while your sci-fi and fantasy readers do enjoy setting, they do enjoy having a picture painted for them and being able to be immersed in the world, they also appreciate brevity in those descriptions. They appreciate efficiency and making sure that when you are describing things, there is a purpose to it. When you are including scenes and mentions and items within the book or whatever, that there is a purpose beyond just, ooh, look at this really cool idea I had and I just had to let you know, even though it has zero bearing whatsoever on the story. Or even just allow that moment to build something. Like, I can think of a lot of descriptions, a lot of information, world building dumps that happen in Sanderson novels, but it is usually done through the eyes of a character to help us connect and understand that character better.
So that's the rule. It's pretty straightforward in that this happens during the editing phase and this happens on behalf of your audience. But this wouldn't be this season if we didn't tell you exactly how to break the rule in the best possible way.
Because as much as we both like this rule, it does help keep books clean and moving. You don't actually want to kill all of your darlings, and a lot of people mistake this advice for, I should remove it because I like it. It's my darling, so I have to kill it. That is absolutely not the case. Just because you like it, don't use that alone as an indicator that the reader will either like it or not like it, that it needs to be removed or to stay. You have to look beyond that emotional level of any scene, of any piece of writing, and look at what purpose is this serving.
This can be a very difficult thing to filter on your own. Of, is it fun just for the sake of being fun? Are we releasing the tension from the last moment? Can we just exhale for a moment and have this enjoyable sunshine character being a sunshine character moment? Yes, you absolutely can. Your beta readers and your editors and even your readers post-publishing will let you know if they were annoyed by the scene because it didn't feel good, it didn't match the rest of the story, or it didn't come up again, or whatever. Or if they were really grateful for this and they love this character and they're laughing at it and such. Relying on other people is helpful because they're not their darlings, except for the fact that you like it and they will feed off of your enthusiasm for the moment.
If you have a scene or a paragraph or information that you really like, that you want to keep, and it is your darling, but your editor or your beta readers look at it and go, I see no reason why this has to be here, there's a couple things that you can do in order to keep it instead of kill it. First off is use that moment. Make it relevant in some way, shape, or form. Use that moment to give us more information about a character and their arc progress. Put in some relationship development or some plot development that will push things forward in your story.
If you especially have a moment later on that feels kind of sudden, where there wasn't enough build up to that moment, whatever this darling scene is, use it to set up in some regard. These characters are bickering about the holidays, and it's just a fun scene for you, the author. They say take it out because this is not plot relevant. You can have a little moment where turns out the bad guy is magically scrying on these characters. All of a sudden, this scene, not because of the content that you loved and made it your darling, but because of the foreshadowing you're putting in place, becomes relevant.
Another way that you can use it is to move it. Put it into a spot where it fits better. Maybe this scene doesn't work because you're breaking up action. Move it to where the pace is slower, where the readers are going to be okay with that kind of breath after whatever, a slower moment or a sweeter moment or whatever. See if there is a different place in the story where it fits and does what you want it to do.
a lot of those transition scenes or traveling scenes, the scenes where your characters are doing something mundane like eating, if you have another cool dialogue, but you have to have this pause elsewhere in the story, stack them, overlap them, and move it to a different place where it's interesting.
And of course, you can always just save it for another story. I do not recommend actually deleting any large scenes or paragraphs or whatever as you're going through the editing phase. A lot of people will have a backup document where they will paste in these scenes that they realize, okay, this doesn't work here, but I don't want to get rid of this writing because I'm particularly proud of it. You can always just copy paste it over into a different document before you delete it. Maybe that scene is going to serve better in the structure of a different story. Maybe you can use some of those lines and sentences to help you build out someone else's story within that world, or whatever it is.
Definitely don't kill it. Don't hit that delete or backspace button. Save it over there, the orphanage. Most importantly, we don't want you to ever filter your first draft because you think you will have to kill it later. This is something that is very commonly applied and misapplied with new and aspiring authors. They hear this information, and before they even write the scene, before they even discover a character's voice because they went through the hoops of creating the scene, they stop themselves from writing it because it's fun to themselves, or they think that they're going to have to edit it out anyway. Please write the thing. Whatever that thing is, whatever that darling is, write it. That's really what we've been saying all episode.
Write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.